Okay, so it is 2:30, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Let me share the screen as soon as it lets me do that. Go live. Okay, so um, a few things I wanted to talk about before we get into today's lesson. Um, I'm impressed to see how many people have actually started. That's not saying that I don't want you to have started on your 2D games, but I am highly impressed, and everything that anybody's turned in looks really good. Um, so I'm excited to see what you guys come up with and how you guys do things. Because I love seeing what you guys come up with and what you guys end up making because it's always cool. Um, so in your discussion board conversations, I am happy to see that it seems like a good majority of you, or a good chunk of you at least sort of enjoyed or were illuminated by the tile level design kind of game article. Because, like I said, in the past, that's literally basically everybody's least favorite article is that one. Um, and I always find it really interesting and really kind of, like I said, illuminating because it's not something that you think of when you think of level design. That being said, some of you made this whole comment about, oh, I hate that there are so many duplicates of this and they just copy that. So one of the things that happens is you create an algorithm or you create a system that works, and then you just kind of market that and you sell the system, and then everybody supplies their own art or just changes things a little bit. And honestly, that makes more money than the actual games do, is selling your base system for how this thing works. So those of you who are programmers, um, it's a good way to make money, because as long as you don't have an exclusivity deal, you can kind of put it either, you can market it yourself or you can put it up on things like, there's all sorts of places that you can put it up, even itch.io, to be entirely honest. But that kind of creates a whole other market. The other thing I wanted to say is that the modernists, so we're talking 1920s kind of area, so post-Victorian era, we have a movement called modernism. And a lot of you guys know it because you think of modern art, or you think of like really weird poetry if you've taken literature courses. But they came up with all sorts of things, and they had like a futurist manifesto and a mechanist manifesto and all sorts of things. And the reason why I get to this is because one of the futurisms and one of the kind of founding ideas that they set forth was that there are no new ideas. And this is really true. There are no new ideas. Like, we've just run out of new ideas to come up with. The reality is that we all kind of have the same basis on the same story, and it just keeps going. And even the things that you think, oh, this is so brilliant, if you boil it down and take all of the bells and whistles off of it, it all boils down to kind of the same, the hero's journey, or a specific archetype, or things like that. And so what the modernists said was that you had two choices, because you knew that you'd basically copied something. You had two choices. One was either to fake it and say it was the most original thing that you have ever created, or not deny it and be like, yeah, it's derivative, so what? It makes money. And that's kind of a big prevailing thing inside of mobile gaming. It's this idea that, yeah, it's another one, but yeah, it's also making money, and yeah, maybe the only thing that I'm resting on are the graphics or this one little cool particle effect. But it brings enjoyment to somebody, and it brings me money, so why do I care? So yeah, so some of you are like, well, you're sacrificing your morals to do this kind of thing, and if that's what you feel like, then that's what you feel like, and don't work for these kinds of companies. But personally, I'm of the opinion that if you're getting paid and it's not something that's hurting people, then, why not make the 3 millionth tile 3 matching game that works the same as Zuma or Bejeweled or any of the other ones out there, or Candy Crush. In the same hand, some of you are like, well, match 3 games are trash, mobile games are trash because they get people addicted to gaming and they don't do anything. What do you think a console game does? Like, let's be real here. Like, use it on your console and play World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, even Bioshock and things like that for hours on end. So some people find casual gaming better. That's fine. Like, honestly, it's fine. It's bringing them entertainment the same way that, playing on a console brings you. So, and I guess that's a personal pet peeve, is this idea that games are games, no matter whether they're casual or hardcore or console or mobile. They all have a place in the world. So, like, I am a huge fan of mobile games because the reality is that I am on the go all the time. And I don't have, I used to be on the go all the time. I didn't have the time to sit down and play console games like I like to. So yeah, I play word games, I play match 3 games, I love Sudoku, so just, games are games. Treat them with a little bit of respect. Yeah. So one of the other things that you guys mentioned in the other thing that you guys had to do, which was on particle effects, was this idea that particle effects seem easier inside of Unity than they are inside of Maya or Max. Yeah, I agree that it is a little bit silly to draw the line in the sand about mobile versus, like, console or big games. So as far as particle effects go, yes and no, as far as whether they're more simple than Maya and Max. A lot of people automatically think that the particle effects in Unity are easier because it's just slapping a bunch of random sliders to do things, but when it comes to Unity, you have to worry about how it's going to actually affect your engine. So that's where things get more complicated, because, if you put 8 million particles per millisecond, that's going to bog your system down. So you have to worry about performance issues, and that's where things get a little bit more tricky. So yeah, it's one of those that it may be simpler to pick up, but it's nearly impossible to master. So, and then on top of that, what I've showed you guys, they either call it Shuriken or the practical particle system, but they also have nowadays a visual effects graph. And so it's really cool. And basically, it's meant to be kind of the next step in the way that particle effects work. And this is going to be more like, as far as all the functionality goes, of what you see in Maya and Max. However, it is more complicated, but it's also visual, so it's a graph line. It literally works like blueprints in Unreal. But see, it looks like, yeah. So it's really cool, and it's got some amazing things in it. And the reason why we use the practical one is because it's harder to bog your system down with it, and it is, even though it's a bunch of sliders and you're just kind of playing with them and not knowing what you're doing, it is a lot easier to do that. One of the other things that y'all seem to, and I mean, most people are under the impression that particle effects are things like rain or, this stuff coming out of a lamp, but particle effects can be used for lots of other things. It can be used for slime trails off of snails, or for cards. Like, if you had a deck of cards and you wanted to show random cards, it can be used for that. It can be used for so many things. It's what happens when you do attacks. It's used for lots of things. And if you come into Unity and actually go over to the asset store, as soon as this loads, they will have visual effects and particles. And generally, they think of visual effects as particles and shaders, and they go hand in hand. Shaders are how things look, and you can apply shaders to 2D. It's a little bit harder, so we'll talk more about what shaders are in the 3D world. But so, like, you've got a mix of things that you think of when you think of particle effects, but you've also got things like mesh effects and different kind of cool things. So don't think that, particle effects just mean one thing. You can also make things like wings on a character specifically just out of a particle effect, rather than having to model everything. So, particle effects and visual effects in general are extremely cool and extremely extensive as far as what they can do. So what are we doing today? Today we are talking about UI, and we're talking about audio, and it's going to be a little bit of a letdown, but I don't really have a lecture for particle effects. I have two videos that I really like because they're simple and they kind of talk about, you know, how to make a follow thing, and then how to make some other kind of confetti things that are specifically more tailored for 2D. You can use them in 3D, of course, but they're more tailored for 2D games. So I've got two videos for you guys to watch, and then your assignment has you do a couple particle effects and some sound stuff, wherever that happens to be. Over here. So yeah, so create 3 buttons, you click them and they play sounds, and then you create a 4th button that loads a new scene, and then in the new scene you have 1 trail particle, which is one of those videos, and 2 particle effects. So yeah, the only reason why I'm not showing you more about particle effects is, one, you had that really great, if you watched Pluralsight, if you didn't, all of those YouTube videos and Unity Learn videos or whatever I gave you guys. So you have all of those to work with, and I just felt like it was silly to kind of retread what you guys have learned using those things. So yeah, so to begin with, let's talk about, and if you're wanting to follow along and you're wanting to kind of get a jump start on how your assignment is going to work, I ask your assignment to be completely in its own new Unity file. So you're going to just create a new Unity project, rather than working directly inside of this one. So instead of this one, my suggestion is to start like a brand new project. But it's up to you. I guess you could do it in here. It just gets really clunky if you do. So, we're going to be using this document first, and I might switch a few things around, but yeah. And if I'm fast enough today, we will get through, and Thursday will be a lab day for y'all. Or if I don't, it's going to be a very short kind of thing on Thursday. So, the one big thing before I actually like launch into Unity that I wanted to show you guys was this line right here. When scripting, to access UI elements, you must have using Unity Engine.ui with your other import statements. So basically, what I mean there, I totally didn't open Visual Studio. If you've got a script, if you can see up in this corner where we have using system.collection, using system.collection generic, using Unity Engine, at the end of those, you're just going to add the statement that I showed you, so using Unity Engine.ui. So that has to be there. It's not automatically included in your import statements. Which is weird, yeah, I know, but it's not. So, and this has a lot to do with the fact that it wasn't originally a thing. Like, Unity didn't originally think that UI was a big deal that they needed to have their own system for. So, as a result, it's not automatically packaged. So you've got to kind of add it in. And I have the Unity documentation down here for you guys, for those who actually want to see it. It'll talk about everything that you need to do, what the difference between rich text and reference, you know, all of that kind of stuff. So, yeah. If what I say doesn't make sense, or you want to kind of like read further on things, this will have way more information than what I'm going to say. And that's the point. Guys, I'm trying to just provide you a really kind of skim the top basic version of this stuff so that you know enough to do things, but that's about it. Okay, yeah. So, if you couldn't see the other one, what I'm talking about is this stuff up here to add in to be able to use anything that references your UI system. So that's text, buttons, your canvas, those kinds of things. You'll just write an extra line down here that says using, if I don't hit caps lock, you'll just write using Unity Engine.ui. And that's it. That's all you have to do. And then it'll like actually, because like right, if I don't have this line and I try to reference a variable called, let's see, private text, you see how it switched over to text alignment? And you see how this is white now? Because it doesn't recognize, this name doesn't exist in this context. So what we have to do is we have to actually add that in, and now suddenly it recognizes it as a Unity variable. So that's super important. If your UI stuff isn't working, this is 99% of the time the problem. Yeah. Okay, so with that said, cancel. Let's talk about UI. So UI systems work, if you looked at the UI system inside of your Mario projects you saw, or inside of the Bunny projects or anything like that, you may have seen that the UI works in a little bit different of a space. So to add UI elements, you can either right click and do UI here and add whatever you want. If you don't really know what you want, you can just put a canvas in. That's the base thing that you need for everything. Or you can come up to game object, UI, and do whatever. So I'm just going to put a canvas in because I know that that's what we're going to want. Now you're going to see that there's a little blue handle right here. And that's generally a corner, right? That's the corner of an object. So with that said, we can tell, if that's the corner, where actually is the UI? Well, if we keep scrolling out, or if we just press the F key, we can see that the canvas occupies a completely different area. And this is partially to keep it out of the way of your scene, but it's also because it just, it gives you a bigger space to work with. And this gets a little confusing because people are like, well, I can't see it directly on my screen. How do I do that? This is one of the times that having your game kind of next to each other, it works because you can start seeing how that's going to look together. Or you don't really have to. It just depends on how you want to do it. Because I've done it for so long, I tend to be okay with just leaving it this way and then checking after I'm done with it. But if you really want to check at the same time, you're going to want to have your game screen up next to it somewhere. If you've got a second screen, it's a great place to put your second screen, or put it on your second screen. If you don't, just dock things the way that you need to. So we got this canvas. Now when the canvas went in, you're going to notice that we also have this thing called event system. It doesn't look like it does anything. It doesn't, it is important. If you have anything that is UI based, you must have an event system. There will be one per scene, basically, or one per canvas. So this and this are kind of a package deal. They come in together. It seems silly because you don't really understand it, but nobody really understands it. It's just the way that Unity built this. And you can see it's got a couple of different things like that, which talks about buttons and things like that, and axes. But for the most part, you're never going to touch event system. You're just gonna leave it alone. So, canvas. Now, when it comes to the canvas, we're looking at different things like render mode, and so you're going to have a couple things inside of here. You're going to see that you can't actually change any of these values, and that's because what it does is it matches whatever your camera values are for the sizing, because this is meant to be your camera. It's got anchors, it's like all of this is grayed out, so you cannot touch it. And basically the reason why you can't touch this is because of how it's set inside the render mode. And you've got this kind of idea of screen space overlay, screen space camera, and world space. So the big difference between these three is that if you want it to be like an overlay, so you want it to be, maybe you want the health in the top left corner, and you want other information on the side or at the bottom. So what you think of when you think of as like a general UI system, you're going to want screen space overlay or screen space camera. And they're going to look slightly different, so it just kind of depends on how you want to use it. And if it's camera, it'll kind of move a little bit, whereas if it's screen space overlay, it'll stay, in that screen space no matter how the camera moves. World space, however, is one that a lot of people don't really use or don't talk about. I don't even think I talk about it inside of the document, because it tends to get confusing. And that's when, say, you want to add like a health bar above a character and it float with that character and you walk around with that character. That's where you're going to like manipulate how it looks inside of the world space. If y'all want to try and do that, be my guest. There's lots of tutorials out there for how to actually manipulate that. But we're going to talk about this whole screen space overlay. That's what we're going to do. So you're going to see where it's got a target display, and that has to do with if you've got multiple displays or multiple cameras, how that's going to work. And then additional shader, like if you kind of highlight, okay, fine, if we don't. Okay, additional shader channels, and that's like, hey, if we want to change how it looks, we can add a shader channel to it. UI scale, constant pixel size, so if you need it to scale with the screen size, how you're going to do it, if it needs to stay a physical size, so that's the size that it was to begin with, constant physical size, and then constant pixel size kind of changes the way that the pixels work. The same way that you saw last time, we have a sorting order, pixel perfect, kind of the same thing. Scale factors, reference pixels per unit, those should all be words that you know. Ignore reversed graphics, so if the graphic is turned, like flipped, do we ignore it, do we not ignore it? And then, does anything block it, or do we mask anything out? So that's basically what Canvas says. And you've got this down here, you can add the components, but what we really want to do is we want to start talking about the different things that you can actually add inside. So if we come down here and we say UI, and again, you can either click out separately, or you can click on the object if you want to make it a child. Making it a child makes life easy. And you can say, hey, UI. And we've got all of these options. So, and you're going to see these things that say Text Mesh Pro. We're not really going to talk about Text Mesh Pro. It's gotten a lot better. It used to be that if you didn't need Text Mesh Pro, you just didn't use it, because it had all sorts of extra options that you really didn't want to have to worry about. Nowadays, it's becoming more of kind of the standard because it works well and because it's not as system heavy. So if you find a tutorial that's talking about Text Mesh Pro, go right ahead and use it. I think I might have a warning in here about not using it unless you absolutely have to. But so instead of starting with text, the first thing that we're actually going to talk about is image. Only because, well, let's talk about something else first. So if you add in image and then you add in a button, you're going to notice that you've got the image back here and the button on top. If we added the button in first, it's behind. So the way that the canvas works and the way that UI works is that it's in ascending order. So the thing closest to the name canvas is the thing at the bottom. The thing farther away, so further down the list, is going to be the thing that's most on top. So just remember that that's a thing. And you're going to see that this is getting a little green and a little funky, and that's because it's still having a little bit of post-processing applied to it. Unless my screen is like literally dying, and I don't think that's what it is. It could be. But so that's kind of the thing. So just remember that this is a thing now. So yeah, we're gonna delete this button, and we'll come back to it in a minute. We're gonna delete this button, and we're gonna come back to it in a minute. So when we put the image in, you're going to notice that it put it in as a square. And that may or may not be what you want as far as sizing goes. And that becomes an issue because maybe, if we come over here and we say source sprite, and that's what you're going to have to do. The same way that I showed you guys how you could change a sprite on anything. You're going to come over here to where it says source image. You're going to select an image, and let's say we want this guy, just for the sake of demonstration. Now you're going to notice it automatically kind of shoved it into a square. And that's not what we want, right? We want it to actually be the size that it was supposed to be, which is 320 by 372. So not quite much bigger than a square, but it's definitely not a square. The issue with that is that you have this idea of the aspect. And all you have to do is you can preserve the aspect or set native size. So sets the size to match the content versus preserve aspect, which is not going to like totally do its thing. Preserve aspect means that if your screen changes, it will also try and stay where it's at. But if you click it, you're going to see that it's switched itself over, but you still have kind of this space here. And if we click set native size, it's going to bring it up to its actual size. And you're going to be able to actually, and now we don't have any kind of extra space. So now you can resize it to what you need it to. This is one of those places where resizing is a thing. So that's how those two work. Use sprite mesh. You're generally not going to have that unless you're doing animation or you're doing 3D world. Yeah. So let's scroll back up to the top and talk about the other stuff that I totally skipped over. So you're going to notice that it's untagged, but that it is on a layer of its own. It's on a layer called UI, which Unity automatically supplies to you. You don't have to do anything about that. So it's number 5. It's, if we come in and we actually look at our layers, it's one of the built-in layers. So yeah. Let's come back over here. So instead of having our normal kind of things which it was like scale, like if we come over to main camera, we have position, rotation, and scale, or city square, again, we've got position, rotation, and scale. If we come into this, we've got a few different options. We have position, position, position. And these work the same way. It's the idea of where it is along this canvas. So along this big thing, remember this is our canvas, and our actual play screen is down here. Teeny tiny down here. And one of the other reasons why it does this is because it thinks that that's going to keep it out of your way. Some of you may have had issues inside of Mario with the UI kind of... I may have disabled it for you guys, so you may have not had an issue. If you find that you've set up your canvas, you've set up your UI, and you're having issues moving things on your screen, you can turn the gizmos and everything off, either by clicking over here and doing this little eye button, and that will kind of hide it and make it not clickable. Or you can like turn it off by doing it this way. So it's up to you how you want to do it. So yeah, there's a few different options for that. But so we have our positions, and again you're gonna see 0, 0. The canvas itself works with a normal kind of grid. So if we move it to -100, you're going to see it starts moving it that way. So it moves it to a 0. 0, 0 is in the center. Just like a normal 4-quadrant math grid that you're kind of used to, because math is normal. Those of you who've taken game scripting, or those of you who are taking game scripting with me, we talked about this, about the idea that depending on the engine depends on where it counts 0, 0 as. And so for Unity, if you're down in your scene, it counts 0, 0 at one point. If you're up in your canvas, it counts 0, 0 at the center point. So that's a fun thing. Not really, but then width and height is exactly what it sounds like. You can change the width, and remember, because we have that whole preserve aspect, it's not actually going to change until we start manipulating both of them. But if we have preserve aspect off, you're going to see it's going to stretch. And now I was talking about how we've got to switch over. We can see that this is how it looks like inside of the game. So it's this idea that, yeah, that's how your UI is going to like stack on top of things. So you can change those around however you need them. The one that confuses everybody though, and this is one of the most important things that you guys are going to work with, and that is anchors. You've got this little thing right here, and if you click it, it will tell you anchor presets, also sets pivot, also sets position. These are incredibly important. You can start using these if you want, and you're going to see that these little kind of arrow things kind of moved where they were. But the reality is that a lot of times you're going to end up having to set them on your own. So then you can see the little arrows, like they were smack in the center right here. You can maybe see them better there. So they were smack in the center. What these do is that these create, if you guys have used anchors inside of like Microsoft Word, these create points in which you want your image to stay. So this is particularly important when we're talking about building our games, because building our games we may have a slightly different resolution than what is inside of the Unity editor, and we have to tell it to stay where we want it to stay. So without anchors, if we were to build this, there's a good possibility that this would like kind of yeet itself off the screen. So what we actually have to do, and these are kind of what part of that is helpful for, and it tells you if you press shift, you'll get this kind of pivot thing. If you also set alt, it'll give you the position. So we can actually move it over to this corner, or move it to the center, or move it to the bottom, or stretch it across. We can do all those things with those. So that's just shift and alt. However, again, what we need to do is we need to grab this little triangle, and you're going to be able to move it. And so you're just going to align it to where it needs to sit so that you know for sure it's going to stay where it needs to stay. And you have to do this for anything that is inside your canvas. So for images, for text, for buttons, you want to be able to do this. This is incredibly important, and incredibly important specifically for buttons, because otherwise your buttons will move around, but not all of their functionality moves with them. So your button may be like up at the top, but the actual clickable portion of it, because that's programmatically set, could be in a completely different area if you don't anchor. So anchors important, super, super important. If you take nothing else from this, anchors. Make sure that you have anchors and that you use Unity UI or using Unity Engine.ui inside of your code. Those are the two most important things above all else when it comes to dealing with UI. So the one other important thing that is right here is this thing that says raycast target. If you want something to be clickable, then you want to have the raycast target on. If you don't want it to be clickable, and you want something behind it to be clickable, then it needs to be off. So what do I mean by that? Say you made a really cool border for the entirety of your scene. And so it's actually an image that's got like, you know, stuff around this edge, and then it's transparent in this center portion. Well, the way that Unity actually reads that is it reads it as a solid block. Yes, it sees that there's transparency there, but inside of its heart of hearts, it knows that this is one image. So if, say, you had things that needed to be clicked on the inside here, it wouldn't be able to be clicked because it says, hey, I've got this thing blocking with raycast on. That means that I'm supposed to be waiting to be clicked. I'm supposed to be listening for clicks on me. So to do that, to make sure that you can click the things that are kind of in this center where it would be transparent, you have to turn raycast target off. And that's all there is to that. So just, you know, that's an important one. The image type, you're maybe not going to worry about this too much other than maybe the tiled version. And that's going to be how you want to, if you need to tile like a background or something like that. So generally you're going to use simple more than any of the rest of them. Sliced, not really. Filled tends to fill everything's out, but tiled and simple are going to be the two that you use. So okay. So the one other thing is we've got this color, and you guys may have played with this already. If you click color, you can kind of manipulate kind of an overlay color, and you can tell it how transparent you want it to be and all that jazz. So it'll create an overlay for you. White will go back to the normal size or the normal color, but any other color is just like an overlay. Material, we're not really going to worry about this. Material would apply like a material feel to it. You don't need to do that, especially not in 2D. Even in 3D, it's a little bit of a stretch for your UI system, but it's nice to have. Yeah. So, let's talk about text. And if I'm not mentioning something, or if you guys want more information, please let me know. Because I know I'm kind of going through this a little bit differently than what the document has. But it is what it is. I love UI. UI is one of those things that I really enjoy doing. It's generally the thing that we do last when it comes to building games for my company. But it's also the most relaxing thing for me because generally I am so done with work, so done with like all the stuff internally to the game that I'm sitting there twiddling my thumbs, fixing code and doing all sorts of other things, and they're like, you know what, we need title screens, and it's like, cool, the game is almost finished, I can do this. And that may or may not be the reason why, I don't know, but I really enjoy doing UI. So, text. Again, remember, we've got this whole kind of the triangle setup that you need to move to make sure that it's where it needs to be. And generally, you're not going to set this first unless you know for sure it's going to fit in there, but just remember that you've got to set it. Now, again, we've got this whole idea of we can do anything, and this is a great way to think about this whole anchors thing. If we say we want to stretch the text all the way across, if we press Alt, we've got this idea that we can stretch it all the way across, and if we press Shift, we're going to be able to get the pivot point in the center. And so maybe we also want to stretch it so that, well, that's probably, let's do this guy. And maybe we want to stretch it, and text is sometimes notoriously difficult to kind of like get a hold of. So maybe we want it to be like that. We want that to be the max area that this whatever we're doing can cover. And we're going to see where that kind of is a downfall, sort of, in a minute. So, text, we write what we want to write in it. It's as easy as that. So, and technically we can see it somewhere, but it's black, so maybe we can't. So let's switch this over to white. Okay, so there we go. We've got the text. If you want to add a different font, if you like say your Arial is not your thing, you just drag your font file in here. So not font settings. It's not font settings. I don't want font settings. I want the other thing. I want... Why is it that when I actually need this, I can never remember what it is? Okay, well, so basically, if you want a font, you just drag it in here. And it can be an OTF, it can be a TTF, it can be basically, if it's a font file, so if we go to like, if we go to Font Squirrel, if we go to anywhere you want to go, any kind of, or to font, or anywhere that you want to go, and you grab one of these, you download it, you just drag that file in. You unzip it and you drag the OTF or the TTF or anything like that. It's the font. Yeah, as long as you can find the file, wherever Photoshop stores it, which I know is in, and I use it all the time, and why I literally cannot figure out where it's at right now. Yeah. It should literally be Yeah, it should just be a folder called font. And why? Because I literally have it set up. Yeah. So my shortcuts and everything kind of went a weird place, so it's not fun. I need to figure out where everything has gone again. But yeah, so basically you just find your fonts, and once you find your fonts, you just kind of, yeah, you shove them in here. Because I think I also cleaned out my, let's see. I think I cleaned out my downloads as well. Because sometimes, yeah, I cleaned my downloads out. Sometimes I have a font kind of floating around in here, but it looks like I cleaned all those out. But yeah, so basically any font that you download, you just grab it and you shove it inside of Unity. And that's it. That's it. That's all there is to it. And you'll be able to use it. And basically it embeds it. That being said, if you're using it for commercial, you need to make sure that the font that you're using is a commercial use font. One of the best places in the world to find commercial use fonts, as a side note, is not DaFont or Squirrel. Squirrel Font's okay, but DaFont or DA font or however you want to call it. What you want to look for is Google Fonts. So all of Google Fonts, as far as I know, are should be. I'm pretty sure they should be commercial use. They were at one point all commercial use. It may be slightly different now. If you click to the about, it'll tell you. But I know they're useful for like web fonts and things like that. So yeah, open source. All fonts in this catalog are free and open source. This means you can use them for anything. So, and if you browse the fonts, you can browse by all sorts of things. They've got 1,000 fonts. Yeah, if you have a font that you make yourself, 100% you should be able to use it, because that's basically what those font making websites let you do, is it gives you the font for commercial use. So yeah, you can use those. And they should provide you with something like an OTF or a TTF, or there's a few other font files, but Unity will take any of them. Yeah. So Google Fonts should be your new best friend as far as fonts go if you're trying to find fonts. And you'll see if you click over to license, it will talk to you. These fonts are licensed under Open Font. You can use them freely in all products and projects, prints or digital, commercial or otherwise. Yeah, so they're free. They're very, very free. And they tend to have glyphs with them, which is helpful if you're trying to write in other languages or trying to write in languages that have accents on them. So, yeah. Okay, so back to Unity. Yay! So, text. So yeah, so we do font. We've got this idea of font size, so we can make it, however big we feel like it needs to be to fit whatever we want. And we're going to see, oh, it disappeared. And this is, those of you who have used things like Photoshop, etc., you have this feel, this feel when you're like, I want it to be just a little bit bigger, and it gets too big, and it finally kind of falls off. And I'm just going to center it for sake of thing. We'll talk about rich text in a minute. But we have align by geometry, which literally means align it by the geometry based. But what we're talking about when I'm talking about, oh no, it's suddenly disappeared, is we have this idea of overflow. So we can overflow something, which would mean that if we now change our font size, run. If we change our font size for vertical overflow, you're going to see that it's able to go outside. And you're also going to see that it's able to go outside of our horizontal because we have overflow. If we click wrap, it's not going to go outside of our horizontal. Again, if we truncate, it won't show at all. So for that, let's go back down. Now, we've got one other button, which is probably the best, easiest, most useful button that they have when it comes to fonts. And that is best fit. And best fit says, hey, you've given me these anchors and the size of this box. I'm just going to try and figure out based on your parameters. So in this case, we truncate and wrap. And I'm just going to try and use what you have for your minimum size and your maximum size. And between those two numbers, depending on what screen I'm showing on, I'm going to fit. I'm going to know how to fit, and you're just going to trust me to fit. It is honestly ridiculously useful. And again, we have this idea of raycasting and whether you need it to be a clickable thing. Now, when we get to buttons, you're going to notice buttons are comprised of both text and like an actual image. And that's literally why we kind of skip over buttons when I talk about this to begin with. Is because all a button is an image and text. And you make sure that it's clickable. That's really kind of the whole thing. So, with that said, font style, which is another one I switched over, bold, italic, bold, and italic. But with rich text, we can actually say, hey, I want to add some HTML in here to make things happen. So those of you who, I think, maybe, I don't know. So back in my day, it was like the super popular thing to know at least enough HTML, but I'm also, I'm a little bit older than MySpace. We'll go with it that way as far as, like, whether it was popular for my generation or not. But it was still, you know, you wanted to Zynga and LiveJournal, which probably means little to nothing to most of y'all. You wanted to be able to do HTML to kind of fix up your Angel Fires and Dreamo stuff. So, yeah. So, you know, so we can say, hey, we want to switch this over to color equals red. And then we want to switch it over to and red. And now you may not see this here, but it should work once we actually press play. Unless something is not connected correctly, and that's a possibility too. Oh no! Why are you not doing that like you're supposed to? So generally that's all rich text means, is that if you have this kind of thing inside of it, it should be fine and happy. But apparently not today. Well. That's literally how that should work. Apparently, whatever I did has decided that it's not working. Is it only going to work on the second stuff? Let's see. Because it should show up inside the inspector and be happy. But we're not going to be because, of course, I'm demoing this today and it's not happy. So, let me just check real quick. Yeah. Why are you not happy? It may be because of the edition that I'm using, the Unity edition that I'm working. Yeah, because that should work. If nothing else, we should be able to yeah, there we go. So it'll do it for the second, but it won't do it for the first. So, okay. Why wasn't color working? There you go. Okay, I don't know what his problem was. But yeah, so HTML. If you know your HTML, if you don't know HTML, I actually have inside of the document, there's a link to the Unity API that tells you what you can actually do and what the color codes, because of course you can use a hex value if you'd rather use a hex value, but they've got some like preset for you so that you don't have to worry about that. So, life is good, you know. So now, of course, you know, and we can also, you can add more. You can say, or I'm going to break it again, which is another possibility. Okay, so we're just going to stop. I'm going to stop looking stupid, and we're just going to go with, I promise you can do multiple things. It just apparently is mad at me today for having to hard reset my computer today. So, yeah. Yay. Okay, so, you know, you can use that if that's to your advantage. Like, maybe you need to make rainbow text. Again, making rainbow text is a pain in the butt. You can find some texts that automatically do it for you, but if you need to, like, set each letter, it's better to do it programmatically, like, internal with some sort of shader than it is to do it letter by letter. But if you have to, you can. So, this is also, like, if your font has, like, preset emoticons in it, so smiley faces, things like that, that you can access using certain code sets, this is how you do that. We talked about all that. Remember, if it doesn't need to be clicked, you can turn the raycast target off. Maskable just means can it be masked. That's literally what it, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so buttons. Let's talk about buttons. Like I said, all a button is an image and text with some extra functionality. So we go to UI. We go to button. Okay, so raw image, because I'm sure some of you are going to wonder, what is raw image versus image? Raw image is sort of image. It just doesn't have any of that extra kind of like scalability kind of things if you add in a texture, and it will ask for a texture rather than an image. And you're going to see these are our base, so these are the things that we just said were images rather than actual sprites. So that's kind of the difference. So adding a button, UI button. And again, you can use the Text Mesh Pro. That's fine if you really want to, but so button, and it comes in as a button. And when we click play, and it thinks about it, you're gonna see it highlights a little bit, and when you click it, it does its thing. And a lot of people get really mystified by this, but when you logically think about it, all it's doing is changing the sprite. So, or changing the color. So right now it's this kind of light gray. When you click it, it changes that over to that medium gray, and then you release it and it goes back to that light gray. So it's just swaps for your sprites. And it's all built in as far as Unity goes. And that includes if you want to change sizes or change what it looks like. So maybe you want to start out, if you click a button, it's a heart, or if it's a heart before you click it, and if you click it, it breaks the heart. You know, you can do that kind of stuff. Or if you click it, a flower petal falls off, or you want to change a shine, or you want to do animation, you can do all of that with buttons. Buttons are incredibly powerful. You can literally make a game just out of buttons. That's not just a cookie clicker, by the way. You can make games completely out of buttons. Yeah. So, like I said, when we come over here, you're going to see that on the top it's called button, but it's got a little arrow next to it. And we know that that means that there's more stuff under it. So there's a text under it. This is also helpful, as a side note, if you create your own buttons and they've already got text inside of them, like... Are you on here? Let's see. I'll show you if I have it. Come on, 3 little dots, do your thing. Okay, there we go. If have, so this is a game that we worked on over the summer that we're now turning into something different. But if you say have buttons that are, that already have words on them, or cards that already have words on them, and like these right here, these are buttons. So open it. Let's open with the thing that's gonna actually open it. So see, it already has kind of a word on it. It's already kind of set up. This is not a great example of buttons, as a side note. These were like fast and dirty buttons. This was not a project that I had the time to do the UI on really well. But, so you can kind of, you can play around with different sprites, you can play around with different things. In the same way, when I talk about the idea of making sure that something's not clickable, oh, this isn't going to open inside of this because it's not. But so, you know, we can keep things that are kind of simplified and then add extra stuff onto it. Sometimes you want templates, sometimes you want all sorts of other things. Just, yeah, are we going to close or no? Okay, cool. Yeah, so just note that you can add in like any kind of image. If you want 1 image to 2 images, or 3 images or 4 images or whatever. You can also add in animations for your buttons. Like there's lots of things you can do. And so the text component on here is just the normal text thing, or you can delete it entirely and it's not going to hurt it, or disable it, your choice. The stuff that's going to be interesting to you is this top thing that's called a button. So the first thing it says is source image, and this is your base image. This is what you want your button to look like when it's kind of normal, when it's not, you know, when it's just like a chilling out button before it's been clicked, and when it's not deactivated. And you can tell it, if you're just wanting to switch the colors around, you can come over here and say, hey, I want to switch the colors around. You don't have to. You can do whatever you want. And again, just like everything else, it works like an image, so you can resize your button, you can do whatever you need to do, however you need to do it. So the color, material, raycast target, of course, because it is a button, because we want to click it, raycast target has to be on. The image type, again, we can tell it what kind of image we're wanting. We can tell where the center is, we can tell, you know, the pixels per unit. And now this is the one that is the most interesting, what I've been talking about. It's this idea of, is the button interactable? So can it be clicked? Yep. Does it do things when it's clicked? Yep. So what do you want it to do? And interactable can be turned on and off via code, or you can just, you know, do it here. But transition, we've got some options. We have none, which means if we click none and we click play, wow, I completely lost the play button for a moment there. If we click play, you're going to see the button no longer, we can click it, and technically it does stuff when we're clicking it, but it doesn't have any kind of change, which is kind of sad. We want those buttons to be interactable. We want to see what's happening when we click them. That's kind of one of those tactile things. We like buttons because they do things. Like in the real world, we like it because you press them and they actually press. It's like when you go to a hotel and you see a bell and you just have this overwhelming urge to tap it, even if you're one of those people who works in a place that has a bell and you hate the sound of that bell. When you see one that's not the bell that you control, you just have this urge to just go ting. It's human nature. Yeah, so interactable buttons are the best that have transitions. So you have color tint, which is where, like what we said, it starts out this white gray color. If it's highlighted, so if you like hover over it, we can change the color. Let's change it to something extreme. The pressed color, the selected color, you've got all sorts of things like that. So now when we play it, and as long as the functionality is built in, when we hover over it, see, I'm not clicking it, I'm just hovering over it. When I click it, it changes to this red. But now, when I hover over it, we've got this kind of green. So, and you've got, you know, multipliers and fades. And navigation, don't worry too much about this because this is kind of how it hooks up to other buttons and other scenes. So for a while, we're not really going to worry about that. And generally, you're not going to worry about it here anyways. You're just kind of going to make it do what you need to do. So on top of that, we have sprite swap, and that's literally where we can say, hey, the target graphics, so the initial one is going to be what we have up here, so the source image. And then if we want it to be highlighted, maybe we want to change it to the boulder. And then if it's pressed, let's change it to Betty. And now when we click play, when you highlight, you're going to get that boulder. But again, remember, so the biggest thing to remember is they're going to keep the same kind of dimensions. And when we click it, we get Betty. Highlighted, clicked. So it's kind of a really powerful way that you can make buttons work. Making card games by using buttons is ridiculously like your best option, to be entirely honest. Especially inside of Unity, if you're gonna just make a basic card game, like that's a really easy way to do it. So we have this thing down here that says on click. Now this is gonna look like some of the other things that you've messed with already, especially when it comes to Cinemachine and things like that. And it's actually gonna work relatively simple. Relatively similar. I can talk, I promise. Oh, the one other thing I didn't talk about is animation. And that's literally, hey, what animations do I want? What trigger is gonna happen when I animate? Yeah. So that's what that is. But so this on click. This is basically a function that's built in for every button. It says, hey, when I'm clicked, what do I need to do? So to do that, and the easiest way, or the easiest thing, or the most, let's say not the easiest, let's say it is easy, it's like one line of code, but the most common thing that's going to happen is that you're going to change scenes when you click a button. Like that's, you're going to go over your title scene to maybe your instruction scene to maybe your actual game, and then after it's done, maybe you're at the credit scene, so you want to cycle back to your title screen. So you're going to have buttons that go between different scenes. And that's, that makes a lot of sense, I hope. Some sense. But you can also have buttons that do other things. Maybe you have a button that flips a card, or you have a button that turns a light on, or a button that does this or that or t'other. You can use buttons for lots of other things, but the number one kind of functionality thing for everybody is going to be that you're going to need buttons. Okay, you don't need them, but they are helpful to switch scenes. So if you're following along, the next one that I'm going to look at is going to be pushing buttons and doing stuff. And this is where kind of, it's kind of a mix of what you're going to have to turn in and a mix of other things. Generally before this, I have another document that talks about scene management and how that's going to work, but we're just going to do it on this one. So scene management is basically this idea that this is what manages your scene. It's that easy. And sometimes you need your own little kind of empty game object up here to do it. Sometimes you just want your buttons to handle it. It just kind of depends. So inside of whatever you're doing, you want to make sure for testing purposes or for everything that you have at least 2 scenes. Like, so I have a sample scene which has absolutely nothing in it, and then I have this one. So to get our buttons to be able to connect, there's a few different ways, and in the other document, the one that talks about changing scenes, I've got all the different ways, okay, maybe not all of them, but a majority of the different ways that you can actually switch scenes or look up scenes. You can change them by name, you can change them by numbers, you can change them by all sorts of things. The number one thing that you got to remember, though, is that no matter what you're doing, is that because you need to build it, you have to come over to File, Build Settings, and you need to make sure that your scenes are actually inside of the build. So, and way back when, at the very beginning of time, I said that these numbers were important, this 0 and this 1. These are the numbers of your build order. This is how we're going to switch back and forth, because you can call by name. It's maybe not the best, but you can also call by number. For those of you who are more programmatic savvy, what you may do when we're talking about calling by number is if you have your scenes set up in such a way that they're in numeric order, you may just have something that iterates, or that, you get to the scene and have it scene equals scene plus 1, that kind of thing. For the rest of us, or the rest of y'all, it may just be easier to say scene equals 0, scene equals 1, scene equals 2, and that's fine. They're both perfectly valid ways to do it. You can run into some problems with either, but yeah. So the best way, though, the way that a lot of Unity will tell you to do, is to do it by your build numbers. So by these numbers right here. So this can get a little messy if you decide to, hey, move this around so that this becomes 0 and this becomes 1. So just make sure that, once your build order is set, just leave it alone so that when you're actually doing scene switching, it's easier. So once we've got that set up, a couple of y'all talked about the fact that, like, your WebGLs were giving you problems. If your WebGL is giving you a problem, just switch it over to PC Max Linux standalone, and that'll build the standalone version so that it's still an executable. It just won't be a web build, so that's perfectly fine. Yeah. That being said, oh yeah, one of the other things, we mentioned it last class, the idea that the jump was buggy. And yeah, so because of the way that Unity is set up and the way that it was coded, inside of the editor, it was very buggy. Inside of the builds, not so much. Why does it work that way? Because Unity wants to make our lives harder. That's it. So, okay, so once we've got this, we can just exit out of it. It automatically saves it. So now we've got 2 scenes. So we need to make a new script. And we're going to create C# script. And you can call it whatever you want. I tend to call it scene switcher. Are we going to... Okay, we're just going to open everything else. Cool. And just like with UI, just like when we say we're using UI, we want to say using Unity engine.ui. When we are changing scenes, when we are accessing anything that is scene related, we have to say, hey, we want to access the scenes. So we're going to use using Unity engine dot, and you're going to see it pops up for you, scene management. Now, if we are just making this script to change our scenes, we literally do not need starter update. Just like with the way that we did triggers, how triggers didn't need starter update, loading scenes doesn't technically require that either. Because all we need to do is we're going to create our own thing, and we can call it whatever we want to call it. I'm going to call it load the level, or I'm going to call it load the level, and then we're going to give it a parameter. Now, for those of you who don't remember what a parameter is, this is something that we have to import. We have to say, hey, we want this thing to be a variable. So maybe inside of our function we have, take this variable and do this thing. So this is basically like how we have over here where we have this public float variable right here. This is the same thing. We're just putting it inside of here instead of up here. And then inside we're going to or externally we're going to define what it is. So it's over here. We're going to call it int, and I'm going to call it build num, because we want it to be an integer, so we want it to be a number, because we know there's either going to be 0 or 1 right now for like my scene. Maybe it'll be different numbers for your scene. And then we just want to add in our curly brackets so that we make this its own little thing. And all we need to say is scene manager dot, and you're going to see it automatically pops up, load scene. And we're going to just say build dump. So what this says is take this parameter, whatever we've put in for there, and load that scene that matches. So we can save it. And when we come over here, we can choose where we want to put this. Some people like putting it directly on their buttons. Some people like putting it on their canvas. It depends on who you are. You may have a completely separate kind of place where it's put. Just, you know, put it somewhere. It doesn't really matter where. So for me, I put it on the canvas because I tend to like collect everything on the canvas and then I call it elsewhere. So inside of the button, where we have this on click, and one of the other things that this looks like for you guys is probably your parameters and things that you were using inside of your animators. If we click this little add button, so instead of like the lesser than, greater than that you saw inside of your animator, you're going to see this kind of thing. And it's like, what does all this mean? So basically it says, hey, on click, what object do you want me to access so that I can pull a script off of it? And in this case, we want to access the canvas. And then this ungrays, and it says, hey, what function? So that's methods or functions depending on who you are. And it's going to have it. We're going to say, hey, scene switcher. That's we wrote this one. We wrote this script. This is the script I want to use. And I want to use, what is it called? I want to use this one. This is the method that I just wrote. This is the function that I just wrote. And it's going to say, hey, okay, so what parameter, what's the value you want to put here? And if we remember right, I don't remember right. Let's see, file, build settings. We are in scene 1. So we want to go to scene 0, so actually that's fine. So now that's set up, and when we press play, it's going to think, and when we click our button, we now go to our empty new scene. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes, it seems easy because it is easy. I guess, spoiler. Yeah, it is that easy. And it's great because that script can be reused anywhere, because what you can say is, you know, if I go to that other scene and I add a button over there, I can call the same script and just change that parameter down here where it's change that number, use the same thing, but then just change this over to 1 or 2 or 3 or wherever it needs to go. So this is remarkably easy to use. Okay, so what if you want a button to play audio? Now remember that the other thing, those of you may be screaming at me, I haven't changed this guy right here, so it's gonna do that. So what if you want a button to play audio? And this kind of translates to playing audio in general, so they're not going to be very different as far as getting like background music to go in and stuff like that. So we're going to delete that guy out of there just so that we don't have to worry about that. So I'm going to create a new empty object. I'm going to call it audio. And then in the inspector, we're going to add a component. And we're going to do audio source. So this is the source of audio. And you can drag your audio clip. So there's another document on audio that makes a big deal about like the different types of audio. Unity is pretty cool about taking just about any kind of audio. That being said, the one giant caveat about using MP3s is their butts and they automatically embed a silent period at the end and the beginning. And it doesn't seem like a lot of time until you actually try to loop those, and then there is this kind of weird pause between them. So your best friends are going to be things like OGGs and WAV files. So just, yeah. There's ways to get around it, like there's ways to delete that stuff out of MP3s, but it's not as much fun. It's easier to just like convert it over and then delete it, or to just not use them at all. So and audio clips work the same way. You just grab them from your folder or whatever, and you put them inside of here. These names are very long, so remember when I said at the very beginning you want to kind of change these names. I would 100% change these names down to something shorter. But, you know, they can go wherever. So my sounds are in here. See, it recognizes them as a sound. If we click them, it's gonna show us what they are. If we click play, it'll play them inside of Unity for us. And you can cut them up. You can do all sorts of things inside of here. So I've got one that's Blackbird singing. It's pretty long, and then I have one that's called Salt Shaker. So it just goes pss, 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 whatever. So I might use it for like shuffling feet, or maybe I actually have salt being shaked. You know, whatever you want to do, however you want to do it. Because you're gonna find that there's some pretty weird sounds out there that like actually make for better sound effects than like actually getting somebody walking around for footsteps. And it's fun to kind of mess with those. Again, if I haven't mentioned this before, I kind of have a lead ear, so sound and I love good sound, but I'm not good at making good sound. So, yeah, we're gonna go with that. So as far as like adding it to a button, so we have this audio thing, and we just need to tell it, hey, what audio clip do you want to use? So do we want to use a long one? Do we want to use a short one? And this is another reason why like actually putting these in with shorter names is helpful, because like right now I know which one these are because of the waves, but maybe I wouldn't. So that one. And it's going to say, okay, so now what am I going to do? Well, you have to tell it whether you want to play on awake, whether you want it muted to bypass, etc., etc. There are also 3D sounds. Again, because we're in the 2D world, we don't really need those, but 3D sounds are really helpful inside of 3D games, because you can get louder and like more clear and crisp as the closer you get to it. So right now, if we just click play, because we have play on awake, and if you wanted to loop, you click loop. It should, because we have an audio listener on our camera, we're playing in the background. So, and that's literally, that's kind of how easy it is. Now to get things to loop from one scene to the next, it's a little bit more difficult, but I have documentation for you guys on how to do that as well. So if we don't want it to start automatically, say we don't want it to start until we push the button, we just take this play on awake off, and now when we play, we're not going to get any kind of bird sounds in the background that I thought was outside. You know, so now we're still silent and everything is great. So now, if we come back over to our button, we can come down to our on click, our new best friend, and we're just going to add one. We can drag our audio into here. We can say, hey, what function do we want to use? So I want to look at my audio source. And what do I want to do? Do I want to play a one shot, which will only play it once and then not play it? Do I want to just continue to play it? Do I want to pause it or stop it? Do I want to unpause when I click? You can pick any of these. So in our case, let's just click play. And so now when we click play, and you click the button, our birds start making noises. Now, if we click it again, it's going to start back over at the beginning. So may or may not be what you want, but That's how that would work. So if you were wanting to get it to like play and then stop and then play and then stop, you have to do some coding, which isn't too hard, but just, you know, for now, all I'm going to ask you to do is this kind of thing. In the same way that if you want to have just one, you can just do one. And again, with this, you can add multiple audio sources. Like you can add another audio source. However, this gets a little bit funky as far as like, because basically you're like putting audio source on top of audio sources. When you're wanting to do this, you can actually end up making an array of audio clips instead, and that gets better as an option. So let's see, modules. The next one I'm going to talk about is, and I'm only going to kind of go over it. I don't know that I'm going to like show too much inside of here. Is we're going to talk about attaching audio and how that works, which we've kind of already talked to because we talked about like the kind of idea of the background music, and just all you got to do is put this in and then click play on awake. And yeah, so one of the things that you do want to think about is this priority button. Higher is lower to 0. Lower is, I don't remember what their max is up here. But basically, for background music, you're going to want this to be on the low side, whereas with something that needs to be in the forefront, you're going to have it closer to the higher side. And you can switch your pitches, you can switch all sorts of things. It gives you a little bit of control here, like not as much control as, say, if you were doing it in Audacity or any other of your sound editing programs. But, you know, that's going to be what it's going to be. And if you want to make sure that it's going to play all the way through to like the next scene and whatever, there's a function built into Unity that's called Do Not Destroy on Load. And I talk about that in the scene management document. I'll talk about it a little bit later. But basically that's the way to get things to continue to play, is that you have things on an object that's not destroyed between levels. Because the way that Unity does things is it absolutely obliterates and destroys everything between levels. So if you want to keep things like your score, or like maybe you want your character to stay the same, or you want your music to stay the same, or your UI to stay up, Do Not Destroy on Load is your best friend. So, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So the document also goes into how you would do it inside of the actual script. So, and basically it's just on trigger enter, and then you use this .get component audio source play if it's attached to your thing. If it's not attached to your thing, then you have to kind of like find it. So, again, it's up to you how you want to do it. But I'm not going to make you kind of show that one. I am going to make you show how to put it on buttons, or how to make buttons do things. But that's all I'm going to make you do. The document also goes across how do you do with audio sources, or like how to put it onto animation. But again, I'm not going to make you do that. If you want to do that, that's on you guys to kind of go in and do. That's what these documents, as much as it is for me to go over them with you guys, it's also for you guys to have easy references to find information. So hopefully that's kind of helpful. So way back when, I showed you a bug. I showed you modules. I showed you a bug down here that if we switched scenes with do not destroy and then we switched back, that I multiplied Betty. So the reason why this happens is because if we select do not destroy, then it just kind of leaves her in the last scene. So then when you come back, you're controlling lots of Bettys. And eventually your system will crash if you get too many of them on there. But it's a fun bug. Sort of. And it is a bug. It's not a feature, it's a bug. Because it definitely wasn't meant, and it definitely doesn't add anything. And all of them can collide with everything, and oh, it gets ridiculous. It's fun, and it was hilarious, because I hadn't thought about it. But, yeah. Yeah, so just, yeah. So this thing right here, this one right here that says scene manage and do not destroy unload. It is a lot of text. And the reality is that what you really need to look at, and it's going to talk about, you know, switching scenes, which is this first part. And I talked about the fact that there are multiple ways to do it. You can use load scene with the scene number in the build. You can do scene manager load scene with the name of the scene. You can do get active scene or get active scene plus build index. You can do all sorts of things. And it's up to you how you want to do it. Again, the easiest one, the one that I think is the easiest, is to do it by your build order. So 0, 1, 2, etc., etc. Yeah. So, and that's, like I said here, it's this idea that, you know, Betty disappeared between switching. And so did any of our post-processing. Not really fun. And again, if you're using triggers, so like if you're walking from one door to the next, you can just put this inside of that, inside of your trigger. You don't have to technically create a whole new function for it. You could just say, hey, if inside of here, if I touch, if other dot da 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 da, we could say, we have to call scene management first. Using Unity engine dot scene management, and then we could do, and remember, if you can't remember, if you've written it down one place, just look for it, and it'll help you write it for you if you can just remember that it starts with scene manager. And that's going to be a little tricky because you're seeing scene manager versus scene management, so Unity loves to do that. So once we have that, that's all you have to do. You just put it inside your trigger. And so now when we come back over to Unity, okay, when Unity thinks that it's ready to come back over to, and we click, let's just turn this off, and we click play. Which one had the door on it? Now you're in your new scene. So if we don't want Betty to be destroyed, we have to actually go in somewhere and say, hey, don't destroy her. And sometimes that's where you put, like, you put your own little, like, a scene manager kind of thing, or sometimes you're just going to put it on inside of here. So maybe you've like, I know that Betty is attached to whichever one of these moves Betty. I don't know. So maybe I'd just add it to one of those, or I'd create my own script that has it, or something like that. Like you could add it to this one. It kind of depends on how you want to do it. And by now, I'm sure some of you have probably seen, watching through tutorials or watching through things that do not destroy unload. So, and I say do not destroy on load, but it's more don't destroy on load, to be entirely honest. So, like this says, when Unity loads this new scene, it destroys everything. It's like, we don't need any of that old stuff. So you have to add in a line of code that says, hey, don't destroy these things that I want. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to make, like I said, to make an extra object called like scene manager or something, or object manager. So that's number 11 down here. This is kind of the way to do it. And it says create an empty game object and call it object manager. Create a new script and call it do not destroy these. And this is the line of code that you need. Whether you put it inside of like this kind of fancy setup, or you put it on a script that is like talking about the thing that you're currently on, you want to use don't destroy on load and then whatever the thing is that you don't want to destroy. So this is a great way, this idea of having a script called don't destroy these with an array. For those that don't know what an array is just a list of objects. So we can do, and then this is what we call a for each loop. Remember that really crazy for loop, which is like int I equals x, or I, comma, or semicolon, 12, comma, plus 2, or whatever, depending on what language you're looking at, depends on what it looks like. Like, it's the one that everybody kind of has a hard time with. There's an easier version of it called a for each loop. And basically all this says is, hey, you've got a list of things. For each thing in that list, do this thing. Seems easy, right? And that's really, it is easy. And what it looks like when it comes to inside of Unity is you get this kind of box that pops up and it says, hey, how many elements do you want to have inside of don't destroy on load? How many of these objects do you not want to destroy? And you just change this and it will change. Like it'll say, hey, okay, so now give me, 8 million things. So yeah, so give me 4 things. I want 4 objects. So the most important thing though is to make sure that it also does not destroy the object that it's on. So, does that make sense? Did you actually code it out? Or do you think you can follow that without a problem? Okay. If you guys do have problems, let me know, because we can either, like I said, my plan for Thursday was to basically let you guys have a full lab day. So, it would literally be like none of me talking and you guys just being able to work on your games or whatever's most important in your life right now. Yeah. Yeah. So, the rest of this kind of goes into why Betty goes crazy and how to fix that. If you don't have something that's going to be switching back and forth, this can get very confusing. And it's just a matter of the beast that it can get very confusing. So if you don't have something that's going to switch back and forth, then don't really worry about this. I'm not going to test you on this. I'm not going to ask you about this portion. But basically what you do is you have to check and see if it's an instance and which instance it is and if she actually exists. An instance is just say, hey, is there only one of these? If there's not one of these, then this is that one. If there is already one of these in existence, then this other thing needs to be yeeted into the sun. So that's basically what this is. And it does get a little bit, because it gets very code. It uses words that you maybe don't know or don't recognize. If instance equals null, instance equals this, and then, So it depends on what you're wanting to do. But I'm not going to ask you, you guys don't have to turn this portion in. I don't think you have to turn this portion in. I'm pretty sure you don't have to turn this portion in. And if you do, I'm going to make it go away. I'm pretty sure you don't. So just disregard this whole zip the file and send it my way. And then it also talks about in this document how to get Betty to spawn exactly where you want her. And basically that's by saying, hey, when I load into this new scene, make sure that I'm standing where I want to be standing. And that's kind of this idea of, you know, translating or moving to where we want to move her to. And, you know, it just says, you know, this is this point, move her to this point, and then we're all good. This can get, I don't think any of you are going to have this problem because I don't think any of you have like 8 million doors in one area. You just have one door that leads to the next thing. And that tends to be relatively easy to do. It's when you have multiple doors and you have to kind of match her to where she's going to the next one, that problems can happen. So, again, it's there for you guys. And again, it's a lot of text because this is like a lot of just code. It's not a lot of visual stuff. So it exists for you guys to use. It's there for you guys if you need it. But yeah, I'm 99% sure that it's not there. We talked about how to reset a physics scene last class. I talked very vaguely about it, I think, last class. So this will walk you through step by step. But you can also use either the bunny hop or the Stackimals game. And the code's already in there for you guys, and you feel free. Literally, I gave you guys those things. I didn't hide the files. They're there for you. So if there's code in there that works for what you're needing to do, strip my code and use it. Work smarter and not harder. Because the reality is that code exists everywhere for you to use. Even in the asset store, you can grab codes for making your characters move. You can do all that sort of things. Yes, I would like to see you guys code at least one thing on your own. But if you find this like fantastic character controller and it works great, or this beautiful particle effect and it works great, yeah, go ahead. I, again, would like you to make at least one particle effect on your own, but I get it. Just make sure to give credit where credit's due. So this will talk about, and this one's not that long. This one, like I said, see the mini game or the bunny hop scripts. So it's very short. You just have to turn your timescale off, and then you turn your timescale back on before you load your new scene, or reload your scene. And this is one where I use scenemanager.load, scenemanager.getActiveScene.name. So basically that says, hey, get the active scene by its name, and just reload the active scene. And that's all you need to do for resetting physics. Is especially this whole turn off and turn on. The one thing that gets confusing is this idea that you have an IEnumerator, so you have a coroutine. And we talked about coroutine. They run kind of in parallel to the basic part of your stuff. So it's a thing. Modules. If you want a loading bar, this is one that I don't like going over, because this is out of the scope of what you need to do. If you have your full game finished and everything is beautiful and you have met all the things that you need to make, or met to make this game actually like follow what the assignment says, then maybe you want to add some bells and whistles. Then maybe you'll want to add a loading bar. Loading bars have to be added asynchronously. So it does involve using a coroutine, and it does get technical. This is one of my more favorite as far as getting a loading bar in. So yeah, so it walks things through pretty easily. And it is relatively short. Just note that, that's how you would do it. So, because I do get this question, and I get that some of you may want to do it, some of you may have time to do it. What else do we have for this week? Loading bar, setting, that one. Like I said, as far as particle effects go, I don't really like forcing you guys to watch YouTube videos instead of me lecturing, but I think in this case, it's a better option. So based on the things that you saw with the Pluralsight and or other ones that you watched, and these two videos, this is honestly, doing these little trail things are one of my favorite things because they can be used for so many different things. Like, this will teach you how to do that relatively, like, it's a 10-minute video, but it doesn't take that long to go through. You can definitely, if it's too slow, go ahead and speed it up using your settings. And then this other one is kind of course, why would you not have an ad that I have to watch? So this one, if I remember right, it shows you how to make more like a 2D particle system using sprites. So this kind of particle effect, which can be really charming and work really well for a lot of things, or, you know, and how to actually, like, again, some of y'all were talking about the fact, you know, there is no physics with particle effects. Nah, particle effects are all physics based. So you can make them do some really crazy fun stuff. So, and this will kind of show you how to do that. Yeah, 100%. The same way that you animate a character, you can animate lava or water or a snake or things like that. But when it comes to like water dripping and things like that, you might actually use a particle effect for that instead. When it comes to 3D, we'd use a dynamic setup, but definitely whatever works for you. If you think you want to animate it, if you want to like actually draw out those frames and do a frame by frame animation, go right ahead. That's cool. I do that. I do a lot of that. Just because that's what I knew how to do a long time ago. So you can also look at Bracky's. Makes me very sad because Bracky's left YouTube. Bracky's is no longer on YouTube, and I think he left all his videos up. But it makes me very sad because he's like probably the premier person as far as really good Unity tutorials go. So he can also walk you through things. His things take a little bit longer to set up, but he's got some really cool things. And his stuff is more based for the 3D world, but again, you can use 3D inside of 2D or 2D inside of 3D. So it's just going to be whatever you guys want to do. How about, no, which of these I want to skip out? So, like, that's a particle effect. That's that whole, like, shoot thing, that's a particle effect. Some people seem to think that particle effects are like these super simple, don't look like anything things, but okay, so whatever. We'll go with that. So I'm going to have you guys watch those because, again, particle effects, well, some of you made this whole kind of point, and I will reiterate it. Particle effects are much more about what feels good and what you think looks good than me being able to say, okay, yeah, if you adjust this one thing here, it's going to do this one thing, and then you're automatically going to have like a merry-go-round or something. Yeah, so it's definitely more of a personal, what feels good, what looks good, what you want it to look like. So that's what I'm going to say with that. And your assignment for today is this one. In class, so create 3 buttons, put them near the top of your screen, make sure that they're anchored, have them labeled play forever, stop, and play once. The first one should play a sound of your choice, the second one should stop the sound. So, and to do that, I told you that there was a stop function. Basically, you're going to access, in the ones on click, you're going to have play forever, and then in the second one's on click, you're going to have stop. So you're going to use the same audio source on both of them, just one of them you're going to have the start or the play, and then one of them you're going to have the stop function. That's how that's going to work. And then the third button is going to have one shot. And again, you're going to access it the same way. There's a one shot kind of option there. And they can be, this third one can be a different sound or the same sound. It's whatever you want to do. Then you're going to create a fourth button somewhere else, and you're going to click it, and it's going to load a new scene. And that's where you're going to have your particle effects. So I'm asking you to make one trail renderer that follows your cursor, which is the second video, the one that I said that I really like making. And then you're going to create 2 particle effects. However you want to do them, they just have to be slightly different. I'm not asking for like the most amazing things. By now you guys should know, I'm not asking you guys to be the most beautiful artists. I'm not asking you to be the most proficient coders. I'm asking you to just be able to do this stuff. No judgment, one way or the other, because I get it. So you're going to create a build, and that can be a standalone build. It can be a web build. If it is a web build, put it up on itch.io for me. If it's not, then you can just put it wherever. And so I guess my question is, do you guys want me to make an assignment where you guys have to look at everybody's stuff? Or do you just want to turn it into me? Okay, then I'll just leave it alone so that you guys can just turn it directly into me. Yeah, so just note that I'll just be looking, I'm just looking to see that you hit these points. I'm not looking that it's beautiful, I'm not looking that it's, the most gorgeous color palette ever. I'm looking that it works, that you kind of followed, that you kind of understand how to make things and do things. Let me actually edit this so that it's more than a file upload. So that if you guys do turn it in through, or if you do put it up on itch.io for me, you can just send me the web URL, or if you put it on Google Drive or wherever, you can just send me the web URL. So, save. Okay, so last thing we're going to talk about, what is due. Remember that you have this next week, and then the week after that is when you have your playtesting due. You have your playtesting due that next Thursday. Basically, this week right here, this mechanic versus story, it's a feature. This is kind of a filler week, if I'm not gonna lie. So you guys are gonna have, the majority of the week is going to be for you guys to do lab work so that you have in-class time to make your games. So the other things that we have is, again, you've got your 2D game checklist, or your 2D game check to make sure that you guys are working. And then your tutorial is platformer with Bolt. So Bolt is the visual scripting. If you guys are used to Unreal and Blueprints, this is going to look similar. Bolt has existed for a long time, but Unity finally bought Bolt, so they bought it from the company, and they've now made it public for everybody to use. So it will walk you through like what we're making. And again, if these look familiar, that's because they are from Kinney and L. So yeah, so Bolt, you may have to download Bolt, you may not. It may just be inside of your project manager or in your package manager. So again, your package manager, if you come over here and you go to package manager, it'll fetch your packages, and you'll just come down to, or it won't be here, so you're gonna have to look for it in the store. Let's see. So yeah, you'll just search for it in the store, and it will tell you how to get it. So you're gonna learn how to do that. And again, I'm not asking you 100% to I'm not 100% asking you to like actually follow along. I would like you to read through it all and watch it if it's got videos. I don't remember. But this is for those of you who maybe scripting is still incredibly daunting, and maybe you took the Unreal class and were like, I really liked that, I can do that. This will show you how to use Bolt. And then Hollow Knight. You've got a thing on Hollow Knight, which is pretty universally loved, which was kind of the point why I picked it. So, yeah. Alright. Are there any questions, wants, desires, needs that I can help with? Okay, so Thursday, how is Thursday going to work? Thursday will 100% be a lab day, which means that you do not need to get onto here. You do not need to log in. You don't have to go into the voice channel. You're just going to use that time the same way that you would if you came into class and worked on your projects. I will exist if you need my help. I am dedicated to you guys for this class, so 2:30 to 4:30. Or 4:40, I think. I am yours. So even if I'm sitting in a game, it's because I'm just kind of sitting there waiting for somebody to ask me a question. Not because I'm actually doing anything. So you'll 100% be on your own. You can ask me questions. You can not ask me questions. I'll probably be grading things if I'm being entirely honest. So yeah, so Thursday you don't have to come to class. You will have to come to class next Tuesday, as far as, join us in our voice thing or watch the recording. But as far as Thursday goes, it is 100% a lab day. Alright, so with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get off, and y'all have a wonderful rest of the week. Oh, this weekend, I will be very hard to get in contact with, because I am spending the weekend with family. So, yeah. I will be harder. I will try. If you guys have a super question, I will try. I will probably not have a computer access, but I will have a tablet. I will have a phone. So I may be able to help if you have questions, but I will be harder to get in contact with. So, okay, with that said, y'all have a wonderful week. And if you guys don't have questions on Thursday, I will see you on Tuesday. Alrighty.